and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm going to talk to you about some tips and tricks for success with stenciling with your essential stencils. So let's get started. Let me introduce myself. My name is Grace Kurtz. I am the owner and founder of The Comfy Nest and a brand ambassador for Essential Stencil. A huge fan. This is a fabulous product line. If you love to stencil and you love to craft and do it yourself at home, this is a great product line to know about and to know how to use, so let's get to it. There are a few things that I want to cover for you today. First one is about surface prep. When you're using stencils, any type of stencil really, keep in mind that the surface that you use is super important. The smoother the surface, the easier it is to have success with your stenciling. So here's an example. This is a plain wooden circle that you can buy at a craft store or Walmart, things like that. And it has a really smooth surface, really easy and usable for doing essential stencils on. But you know, sometimes you get things that you love and you want to stencil on and you want to decorate on that aren't so smooth, like palette wood, or here's an example. This is just reclaimed wood from some fencing that my girlfriend gave me. I use this wood a lot for creating little signs for my business. But you see, it has little holes in it. It has cracks in it from years of use. It's reclaimed lumber, folks. When you have surfaces like this, it is really important before you do your stenciling that you do a little bit of work to prep your surface. And so what that means is just taking a coarse grit sandpaper and sanding over it, and then going over it with a fine grit sandpaper and sanding over it so that you have a nice smooth surface to do your stencil on. If you think about it, the more porous and the more cracks and crevices on your surface, the more difficulty you'll have getting a really clean, crisp design and look to your piece that you're working on. So make sure that you take some sandpaper to your reclaimed lumber or palette wood before you do it, or just use a really smooth piece of wood before you get started. And really, you can stencil on anything, folks. You can stencil on wood, you can stencil on glass, on fabrics, on different types of surfaces. But we're talking specifically about wood today. As you get going and you learn the tips and tricks that I'm going to teach you, you'll get a feel for what really works for you. So surface prep, it's really important to think about that before you get started so that you have success. Now, what do we recommend that you use? Best products to use when you're stenciling? There are several different options. So you're going to need, obviously, some paint, some type of paint to design your stencil with, to get your stencil onto your surface. So what I recommend for you guys to think about is to find a paint that is a really decent quality, really get a decent thickness to the paint itself. If it's a really thin, watery paint, you're gonna have more chance of bleed through, which is just your lines won't be crisp. They won't be, I just don't think you'll be happy with it. You'll have more, it'll look like more mistakes. So you wanna find a really thick paint, and one that I suggest that's really cost effective. It's not super expensive. It's really easy to find. Most craft stores and box stores like Walmart, Kmart would have this, is the Waverly chalk line of paint. It comes in the big bottle. It also comes in a smaller bottle, and the price is like $3 to $6 for depending on what size you get. So it's really not, you don't have to spend a ton of money, folks, to get some beautiful designs, and it comes in lots of colors. So this is what I'm going to be using today, this Waverly paint brand. So you want to make sure you have a nice thick paint that has a nice saturation of color, and that's the one that I suggest. You can really use any paint that you want. And the more, like I said, the more you try it, and the more you work with your essential stencils, the more you'll get a feel for what works best for you and the environment that you're working in. Okay, next up is your brush or your applicator. There are a few options for this as well. Some folks like to use a stencil brush, which looks like this. It has a round head to it. Lots of bristles in there, usually pretty dense. This is a really big one. I also have a little one here. This one's really tiny. This is a stencil brush that you could use. This is one option for stenciling. Another option that a lot of folks find in their craft stores or box stores are these foam brushes, and this one's been used. This is a spouncer, they're called, and this one is a 1 1/4 inch, but it's a foam spouncer that you can use to do your put your paint on and to do your stenciling. So this is another option, but I'm going to show you my preferred, and I think Essential Stencil really, the folks over there really like this option too. I use a simple makeup wedge. Yeah, you heard me right, a makeup wedge. This is what it looks like. It's a little triangular sponge that's really easy to hold on to. I already got paint on this one. And this is the one that I'm going to use to show you today how to do your stenciling. These come, oh my gosh, they're so cost effective, you guys. I've got this set at Walmart. That's the Equate brand. You get 100 of them and they're just a few dollars. So really cost effective and easy. You can throw them away because they're so cost effective. You can just throw them away when you're done. So that means really easy cleanup. So I'm going to show you how to do it using this. And I may even pick up a brush to show you that way as well. But that's another thing that you want to have on hand is some type of applicator. And I gave you 3 good options that you can choose from. Whatever one you like the most is the one you should choose. Okay, now let's get to it. I'm going to be using today a stencil from this set, which is the Bible verses set. They're so sweet. And I picked the one that says Walk Humbly. It's Micah. Chapter 6, verse 8. I'm going to turn the camera down and let's get started. Okay, so I have my board here and I'm actually using one of these reclaimed pieces of wood and I painted over it with the Waverly and the color Plaster, which is a really pretty creamy white. It's already pre-painted and dried. Then I'm going to take my stencil, this really thick, beautiful stencil, and I'm going to place it down here on my board and place it exactly where I want it. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the type of stencil material that Essential Stencil uses because it is superior of anything that I've ever tried. This stencil, you can tell, you can see because I hold it up, it kind of stands to the hold up test. When I hold this up, it doesn't flop around, it stays in place because it's a nice, thick, easy to use, easy to clean Mylar product. Now, I'll tell you, I have lots of stencils in my craft stash and with my business, I've purchased many over the years. I'm going to show you another example of one that I purchased. Got this one off Etsy. I want to just show you how very thin this one is. When I hold it up, it flops like a piece of paper. It is so very thin, and what I found with this, that it was just very difficult to use because it's kind of flimsy. The pieces kind of move about a lot. When you're trying to hold it down, it wiggles around and it's extremely difficult to clean. So I really try to avoid every other stencil because now I know that Essential Stencil really is the best quality I've found on the market and the same price point as many others. So this is what I'm sticking with. It really is a superior product for you guys, especially if you're new at stenciling. You really want to have a nice, thick, easy to use, easy to hold stencil. And easy to clean as well. So what I'm doing is I'm taping my stencil down. I have a little roll of painter's tape here. You don't have to do this, but I feel like it's a lot easier to stencil when you stencil or when you get that taped down onto your board because it just stays in place. You can just be assured that if you have to walk away for a minute or pick up your hand, you can do that without any trouble or any problem with your stencil shifting around on you. I like to place a couple of pieces of painter's tape, especially close to the edges, so that I don't have any overages with my painting. And then I'm going to show you how to do this. I use a piece of tin foil to put my paint on, and I'm using Waverly, this beautiful color called, what is this one called? I think it's Agave. Yes, it is. It's Agave. And I'm just going to put a little bit here on my tin foil. You can use a paper plate. You can use a paper napkin. You can use a piece of paper, but you want to have that on there. And then I'm going to grab one of my makeup wedges, a clean new one. And really what we need to do is we need to get some of our paint onto our applicator, whichever applicator you choose. But when you do this, it's really important that to minimize the paint bleed, which is like takes away from the crisp lines that you really want to have with your design. You want to make sure that you don't have too much paint on your applicator. So what I do is you load it up, and you can see I got a glob of paint on there. You load it up, and then what's really important that you offload, which means taking off most of what you just put on. I know it seems counterintuitive. You're going to take off most of what you put on. This is called offloading. It's very, very important. If you have too much paint on your applicator, you will get bleed through. When you put this down on your project, that glob of paint will bleed through underneath your design, and then it just won't look so pretty. So make sure you offload most of the paint. And then what I want you to do is come over to your project, and this is called the stippling technique. I like to call it pouncing, where you're just gonna go in an up and down motion to apply that beautiful agave color onto our white board, and it's gonna show up so beautifully. So just up and down, up and down. When you're doing a pouncing motion, if you're gonna use either your makeup brush or you're gonna use your foam pouncer, this is the motion that you want. And some people call it stippling. And when you're running low on paint, just go back to your tin foil or your paper plate and add some more. Easy breezy. Okay, so let me show you. This is what we're gonna do with our pouncer, which is our foam applicators. I wanna show you, if you're going to choose to use a brush, like one of the brushes I showed you, this one already has some of the agave paint on it. It's the same principle. You're gonna pick up some paint on your brush and get it in your bristles, and then I want you to offload. Offload as much of it as you can. Lots and lots of it. This is called the dry brush technique, and it's called dry brush because your paintbrush is pretty dry when you're gonna start working on your project. You do not wanna have a lot of paint on there or in the bristles. So you're gonna offload much of it, and then you're gonna come back to your project, and in small circular motions, you can then start to add paint to your design. And it's just going to offload into your design and keep that beautiful font crisp and clean. But again, you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of paint on your brush. Otherwise, you could have a big old mess on your hands. So you can use this. And I don't go in any particular order. I just kind of go wherever I feel like going on my design. It doesn't really matter. It's all going to end up painted in the end with your paint on it. Okay, so you can use the brush if you like. You can use the sponge applicator, the pouncer, spouncer that it's called, or the makeup wedge. I really prefer the makeup wedge, so I'm gonna go back to that. I'm gonna add a bunch of paint. I'm gonna offload a bunch of paint, and then I'm back to my design. I can see here I have a little light coloring compared to the rest of the places, so I'm gonna go back here because this is probably already dry and add a second layer to the bottom of my T. I don't need a second layer everywhere, but I can see I was a little light-handed, probably a little excited. And now I can move on to my H. So you just look over your project and where you've already gone over it. And if you need to add a little more, you can always go back and add a second layer. It's better to add 2 very dry, soft, light layers than to add 1 big, heavy, wet layer, because when you do it that way, like I said, you'll get more bleed through than you want, and your lines just won't be crisp. So just keep going through your project, adding paint, offloading it, and then stippling or pouncing it on. I really love this color, you guys. I like the white and I like this teal, and it makes me think of springtime and summer, and those are my favorite seasons for real. And this is the color in my kitchen and living room, and this is gonna go in my kitchen or living room. So there we go. Okay, so I think I have most of it covered. Now, here's a tip for you. What's really nice about having the painter's tape, I will take off just 1/2 of the painter's tape, lift up the stencil, and this half is still gonna be held on there. I can look at my design, and then if I don't like it, if I need to fill in any space, I can put it back down and fill in. I can see already I have a couple of places to fill in. I can just see it with my eye here, so I'm just gonna do that before I lift this up. It's better to do it, less work, do it once rather than doing it more than once. All right, let's see, I'm gonna pick this up and see, oh, my K needs to be filled in. And see, I'm not adding more paint to the makeup wedge. That little tiny bit of paint is plenty to get around and fill in all these letters and numbers sufficiently. Okay, so now I am gonna pull this up, and we'll take a look at this design and see if it worked out right. It's perfect. It's perfect. Awesome. Essential Stencils makes it so easy and helps you to make perfect designs every time. And with these tips and tricks, I'm hoping that you can do the same. Now, if you do get a mess up, I don't want you to just stress out about it too much, you guys. What I want you to do is to take a really fine tipped paintbrush Just get the tiniest paintbrush that you have. Go back to your original color. If your base is white and you want to clean up and hide some of, like, maybe you did have a little bleed through of your blue color, your agave, I want you to take your original color, and you could even do it from the cap because you do not need a lot of paint. Pick up a little bit of paint. Same premise. You pick up paint on your brush. I want you to go back to your tin foil and offload much of that. And then we can come in here, and wherever we see a spot that we may have gotten some extra blue, we can just go in and touch up very easily. I don't really have that to worry about, but you could see. I could just go in and touch up very easily next to my letters, really close, because I have a very tiny little paintbrush to clean up any overages that you might have or bleed through. So there you have it, you guys. I'm so glad you joined me today, and I hope some of these tips and tricks towards success with your stenciling really are helpful. Thanks for tuning in, and go have some fun with your essential stencils.